In a small quiet town where everyone knew each other by name, music had always been the heartbeat of the community. It wasn't unusual to see groups of teenagers gathered in the park on weekends, strumming guitars or tapping out rhythms on makeshift drums. Among these regulars was a boy who stood out not just because of his guitar skills, but also because of his outspoken personality. He loved to talk about politics, social issues, and anything that sparked a debate. People often teased him for being too opinionated, but no one could deny his passion or his talent. This boy, known around town for his fiery views and love for rock music, carried his electric guitar everywhere he went. To him, it wasn't just an instrument. It was an extension of himself, a way to express everything he felt words couldn't fully capture. His confidence in his playing bordered on arrogance, though he didn't think of himself as cocky. He simply believed that years of practice and dedication made him better than most. And honestly, he might have been right, at least until someone else entered the picture. One day, while practicing under the shade of a towering oak tree, he noticed her sitting quietly on a bench nearby. She was older than him by a couple of years and rarely spoke unless spoken to. Her presence was calm, almost unassuming. Yet there was something intriguing about the way she held her acoustic guitar. It looked like it had seen better days. Its wood scratched and worn, but in her hands it seemed alive. He'd heard whispers about her before. Some said she wrote her own songs. Others claimed she could play anything after hearing it just once. But to him, those were just rumors. After all, how good could someone be if they never stepped into the spotlight? Curiosity got the better of him that afternoon. Putting down his guitar, he walked over to where she sat, his usual bravado leading the way. "Hey," he called out, loud enough to catch her attention. When she looked up, startled by the interruption, he continued, "I've heard people say you're some kind of musical genius. Is that true?" She blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. There was no arrogance in her expression, only mild surprise. After a pause, she shrugged and said softly, "I don't know about genius, but I do enjoy playing." Her modesty only fueled his competitive spirit. Grinning, he gestured toward his guitar leaning against the tree. "Well, here's the thing. I'm pretty confident in my skills, but I haven't had the chance to test them against anyone decent. So, what do you say? Let's settle this with a little challenge, a guitar battle. Right here, right now." The idea hung in the air between them, heavy with anticipation. The few people lounging nearby perked up at the suggestion. Curiosity piqued. A guitar battle? That sounded exciting. Slowly, a small crowd began to form, drawn by the promise of entertainment. Whispers spread quickly through the park. "Did you hear? They're going head-to-head." For her part, she hesitated. It wasn't fear exactly, more like uncertainty. She hadn't performed in front of others in years, preferring the solitude of her room to the pressure of an audience. Still, there was something about the challenge that stirred something inside her. Maybe it was the opportunity to prove herself, not to him, but to herself. Or maybe it was the thrill of stepping outside her comfort zone. Whatever it was, she nodded slowly and agreed. "All right," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves, bubbling beneath the surface. "Let's do it." With that, the stage was set. He grinned triumphantly, already imagining his victory. This was going to be easy, he thought. How could someone so quiet possibly match his energy? As he grabbed his guitar and adjusted his strap, he shot her a confident smirk. "You ready to get schooled?" But instead of responding with words, she picked up her acoustic guitar and gave it a gentle strum. The sound was soft but clear, cutting through the chatter of the growing crowd. For a moment, all eyes turned to her, and even he felt a flicker of doubt. What if the rumors were true? Shaking off the thought, he reminded himself of his years of practice and countless hours spent perfecting his craft. No matter what happened, he told himself he wouldn't lose. The rules were simple. Each round would allow them to showcase their skills however they wanted. Whoever impressed the crowd more would win. Not that either of them cared much about winning, well, not entirely anyway. For him, it was about proving his superiority. For her, it was about finding the courage to share her gift with others. As the first notes rang out, signaling the start of the battle, the atmosphere shifted. The casual chatter faded, replaced by an electric silence. Everyone leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. Little did they know this wasn't just going to be a friendly competition, it was about to become something far greater. The first round began with him stepping up, his electric guitar gleaming under the sunlight. He wasted no time diving into a high-energy solo, fingers flying across the fretboard like they were on fire. The sharp, metallic twang of his strings filled the air, drawing gasps from the crowd. It was flashy, loud, and undeniably impressive. Exactly what he had intended. Each chord seemed designed to show off his technical skill, and the speed at which he played left many in awe. As he finished, with a dramatic flourish striking a final power chord that echoed through the park, the audience erupted into applause. Cheers rang out, and a few people even whistled. He couldn't help but grin, basking in the attention. Turning to her, he raised an eyebrow, silently challenging her to match what he'd just done. In his mind, there was no way she could top that performance. But when it was her turn, something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to compete with his intensity, she took a completely different approach. Picking up her battered acoustic guitar, she sat down cross-legged on the grass, as if she were alone in her room instead of in front of a growing crowd. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the murmurs of anticipation fade away. Then, with a deep breath, she began to play. What followed wasn't flashy or fast, it was soft, almost delicate. Yet every note carried a weight that silenced the entire park. Her fingers moved gracefully over the strings, coaxing out a melody so hauntingly beautiful that it felt like time stood still. There was no need for theatrics. The music spoke for itself. People exchanged glances, their expressions shifting, from curiosity to pure wonder. Even he found himself momentarily frozen, his earlier confidence wavering as he listened. When she finally stopped playing, there was a beat of silence before the crowd burst into applause. Not the rowdy kind he was used to, but something quieter, more reverent. Some people clapped slowly, shaking their heads in disbelief, while others simply stared, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. He forced a smile, though inside, he was rattled. This wasn't supposed to happen. How could someone so unassuming play like that? The second round started with him determined to reclaim control. If subtlety wasn't going to win the crowd, then sheer force would. He launched into another piece, this time choosing a classic rock anthem everyone recognized. His energy was unmatched, his movements wild and unrestrained. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he poured everything he had into the performance, making sure every note hit hard. By the end, the crowd cheered loudly again, clearly entertained by the spectacle, but once more, when it came to her turn, she flipped the script entirely. Instead of matching his volume or complexity, she played a song that felt deeply personal. As her fingers danced lightly over the strings, she told the story behind the tune, how it was inspired by her late grandmother, who had taught her how to play. She always said music should come from the heart, she explained softly, pausing briefly before continuing. Every strum resonated with emotion, painting vivid images of love, loss, and resilience. It wasn't just a song, it was a memory brought to life. The effect on the audience was immediate. People leaned in closer, captivated not only by the melody, but also by the sincerity behind it. A few wiped away tears while others nodded along, visibly moved. When she finished, the applause was louder than ever. But it was different this time. Warmer, more heartfelt. Even he had to admit grudgingly that she had done something extraordinary. By the third round, the tension between them was palpable. He knew he couldn't afford to hold back anymore. Pulling out all the stops, he chose a jazz riff he'd been practicing for months, a complex, intricate piece meant to showcase his technical prowess. His fingers blurred over the fretboard, hitting notes so quickly it almost sounded like two guitars playing at once. The crowd watched in amazement, their jaws dropping as he executed each difficult passage flawlessly. By the time he finished, the applause was deafening. Yet, when she stepped forward, she didn't try to replicate his complexity. Instead, she improvised. Starting with a simple progression, she layered harmonies and subtle variations, building a melody that felt both spontaneous and masterful. It wasn't about showing off, it was about creating something genuine. And just like before, the audience responded, not with raucous cheers, but with a collective sense of awe. They weren't just listening anymore, they were feeling. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, the battle reached its final round. Both competitors were visibly drained, their earlier bravado replaced by a mix of exhaustion and determination. He glanced at her, wondering if she had anything left to give. She met his gaze calmly, her expression unreadable. Whatever was coming next, it was clear neither of them was holding back. What happened in that last round would stay etched in everyone's minds for years to come. Not because of the competition, but because of the connection forged through music. But that's a story for another part. The final round began with a charged atmosphere, the kind that makes your heart race and your palms sweat. Everyone in the park had stopped what they were doing to watch. Even the kids who had been chasing each other around the swings quieted, down sensing that something big was about to happen. The boy took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the strings of his electric guitar. This was it, the moment where he either proved himself or admitted defeat. He wasn't ready for the latter. He started strong, launching into a piece that blended blues, rock, and even hints of punk. It was chaotic, yes, but intentionally so. Every note screamed rebellion, every chord hit like a punch to the gut. His foot tapped furiously on the ground, keeping time as he leaned into the music, his body swaying with the rhythm. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he didn't care. This wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about leaving everything on the field, or in this case, the park. The crowd roared their approval, clapping along to the beat. Some people whistled, while others nodded their heads, caught up in the raw energy of his performance. For a brief moment he felt invincible, like nothing could touch him. But then out of the corner of his eye he saw her standing quietly with her acoustic guitar, waiting for her turn. Her calm demeanor unnerved him. How could she look so composed after everything he'd thrown at her? When he finally finished, the applause was thunderous. People cheered and hollered, clearly impressed by the intensity of his playing. He took a step back, chest heaving, and glanced at her. "Your move," he said, his voice tinged with both challenge and curiosity. What would she do now? Could she possibly top what he'd just done? She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood there for a moment, cradling her guitar like an old friend. Then, without any fanfare, she began to play. Her first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they quickly grew into something breathtaking. Unlike his aggressive, in-your-face style, her music was layered and intricate, weaving together elements of folk, classical, and modern pop. It was the kind of sound that made you stop and listen, not because it was loud, but because it demanded your attention. As she played, the crowd fell silent again. You could hear the rustle of leaves in the background, the distant chirping of birds, but nothing else. Everyone was transfixed. There was something magical about the way she combined simplicity with complexity, creating a melody that felt both familiar and new. It was as if she wasn't just playing music, she was telling a story, one that spoke directly to the soul. Halfway through her performance, something remarkable happened. Without saying a word, she started incorporating subtle nods to the pieces he had played earlier. A quick riff here, a familiar chord progression there. It was her way of acknowledging his talent while still making the music her own. The boy noticed it too, his eyes widening in surprise. Was she complimenting him through her playing? It was a gesture so unexpected, so generous, that it left him momentarily speechless. By the time she reached the climax of her piece, the entire park seemed to be holding its breath. Her fingers moved with effortless precision, coaxing sounds from her guitar that no one thought possible. And when she finally strummed the last note, letting it hang in the air like a question, the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly the applause began. It started with a few tentative claps, but soon it built into a wave of noise that filled the park. People stood up, cheering and whistling, some even wiping away tears. It wasn't just appreciation. They were moved deeply and profoundly. She lowered her guitar, her face flushed but serene, and gave a small bow. No words were needed. The music had said it all. The boy watched her, his earlier bravado replaced by something else entirely. Respect. He realized now that this battle had never really been about winning or losing. It was about connection, about finding common ground, through something greater than themselves. Music wasn't a competition. It was a conversation. And in that moment, he felt humbled. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the crowd began to disperse. People lingered for a while, chatting excitedly about what they had just witnessed, but eventually they went their separate ways. The boy walked over to her, his guitar slung over his shoulder. "That was incredible," he said, his voice sincere. "I've never heard anything like it." She smiled softly, her earlier shyness returning. "Thanks," she replied. "You weren't bad yourself." They stood there for a moment, two musicians brought together by a shared love of their craft. Neither of them said much, but the unspoken understanding between them was clear. They had pushed each other to new heights, not out of rivalry, but out of mutual admiration. Later that evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the boy couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He replayed the day's events in his mind, marveling at how someone so quiet could have such a powerful impact. For years he had prided himself on being the best guitarist in town, but today he had learned something far more valuable. True greatness wasn't about technical skill or flashy performances. It was about authenticity, about pouring your heart into every note and letting the music speak for itself. From that day forward, his perspective changed. He started paying closer attention to the stories behind the songs, the emotions woven into the melodies. He even began writing his own music, drawing inspiration from the world around him. And though he and the girl rarely crossed paths after that day, her influence stayed with him, shaping the way he approached his art. Meanwhile, she continued to play her guitar in quiet corners of the park, sharing her gift with anyone lucky enough to stumble upon her. Word spread quickly about the mysterious musician whose performances left listeners spellbound. People came from neighboring towns just to catch a glimpse of her, hoping to experience the magic firsthand. Years later, when the townsfolk reminisced about that fateful afternoon in the park, they didn't talk about winners or losers. They talked about the power of music to bring people together, to bridge gaps and heal wounds. That guitar battle hadn't been the end of a rivalry. It had been the beginning of something beautiful. The days following the guitar battle felt different for everyone who had been there. The boy couldn't shake the memory of her final performance, no matter how hard he tried. It wasn't just the technical brilliance or the emotional depth, it was the way she made it look effortless. Like the music wasn't something she was forcing out, but something that flowed naturally from her soul. For someone who had always prided himself on his skills, this realization hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was more like a quiet admiration, mixed with a dash of frustration. How could someone so unassuming have such a profound effect? He spent hours practicing after that day, not to prove anything to others, but to understand what he'd witnessed. He replayed bits of her songs in his mind, trying to replicate the same raw emotion in his own playing. But every time he picked up his guitar, he found himself stuck. No matter how fast or loud he played, it didn't feel the same. Something was missing, and he knew exactly what it was. Authenticity. Her music hadn't been about showing off, it had been about sharing a piece of herself. And that was something he hadn't fully grasped before. Meanwhile, life went on as usual for her. She returned to her quiet routines, spending hours alone in her room with her guitar or sitting by the riverbank, lost in thought. The battle hadn't changed her much. She still preferred solitude over crowds, but it had given her a newfound confidence. For years, she'd doubted whether her music mattered, whether anyone would care about the stories she told through her songs. That afternoon in the park had answered those questions. People did care. They listened. They felt. And that knowledge stayed with her, lighting a small fire inside her chest. A few weeks later, the boy decided to visit the park again, hoping to find her. He brought his guitar along, not because he planned to challenge her to another battle, but because he wanted to really talk. When he spotted her sitting under the same oak tree where their showdown had taken place, he hesitated for a moment. What if she didn't want to see him? What if she thought he was only there to compete again? Shaking off the doubts, he walked over and sat down beside her without saying a word. She glanced at him, surprised but not unwelcoming. "Hey," she said softly, setting her guitar aside. "Hey," he replied, feeling oddly nervous. After a pause, he added, "I've been thinking a lot about that day." She tilted her head slightly, studying him with curious eyes. "Yeah? What about it?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I guess I realized something. I've always thought being good at something meant being better than everyone else. But watching you play, it made me realize that's not what matters most. It's about connecting with people, isn't it? About making them feel something." Her expression softened and she nodded slowly. "Music has always been my way of saying things I can't put into words. If it touches someone, even just one person, then I think it's worth it." They sat there for a while, talking about everything and nothing. He asked her about her songwriting process, and she explained how she drew inspiration from everyday moments. The sound of rain tapping against her window, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the ache of losing someone you love. In return, he shared his own struggles, admitting that he often felt trapped between wanting to stand out and fearing he wasn't good enough. Their conversation flowed easily, like they'd known each other for years. By the time the sun began to set, they had exchanged tips, swapped favorite songs, and even jammed together for a bit. Their styles were completely different, one bold and energetic, the other soft and introspective, but somehow they complemented each other perfectly. It was as if their guitars were having a conversation of their own, blending melodies in ways neither of them had imagined possible. Word spread quickly around town about their newfound friendship. At first, people were skeptical. Weren't they? Supposed to be rivals? But soon everyone warmed up to the idea. After all, it wasn't every day you saw two musicians with such contrasting personalities come together to create something special. Inspired by their collaboration, the boy suggested organizing a community concert, a chance for local artists to showcase their talents and bring the town closer together. She agreed, though she initially worried about performing in front of a larger audience. "What if they don't like it?" she asked him one evening as they rehearsed in the park. "They will," he assured her, his voice firm. "Trust me, your music speaks for itself. Besides, we'll do it together. You won't be alone." True to his word, they worked tirelessly to prepare for the event. Flyers were posted around town, inviting everyone to join in the celebration. On the night of the concert, the park was packed with families, friends, and neighbors, all eager to hear what the duo had prepared. Strings of fairy lights twinkled above, casting a warm glow over the makeshift stage. The air buzzed with anticipation. When they stepped onto the platform side by side, the crowd erupted into applause. The boy kicked things off with an upbeat rock number, getting everyone clapping along. Then, halfway through the set, she took center stage, her acoustic guitar glowing faintly in the soft light. As she began to play, the chatter faded, replaced by a collective hush. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried across the park, weaving tales of hope, resilience, and unity. By the end of her song, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. For the grand finale, they combined their strengths, creating a medley that blended genres and emotions. It was messy in parts, imperfect in others, but that only added to its charm. When the last note rang out, the crowd leapt to their feet, cheering wildly. It wasn't just a performance, it was a testament to the power of collaboration and the beauty of embracing differences. Afterward, as they stood backstage catching their breath, the boy turned to her with a grin. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "We did," she agreed, smiling back. "And maybe we should do it again sometime." From that point on, their partnership became a staple of the town's cultural scene. Together, they used their music to raise awareness about social issues, hosting fundraisers and charity events that brought the community together. Through it all, they remained humble, always reminding themselves and others that the true purpose of art was to inspire change and foster connection. Years later, when people looked back on that summer, they remembered it not for the battles fought but for the bridges built. Two musicians brought together by a simple challenge had managed to leave a lasting impact on their town and on each other. Their story served as a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones we win over others, but the ones we achieve within ourselves. The success of the community concert didn't just bring people together. It sparked a ripple effect that touched every corner of the town. Inspired by what they had witnessed, more musicians, both seasoned and amateur, began stepping forward to share their talents. What started as a one-time event quickly turned into a monthly tradition. Park nights, where anyone could perform under the stars. The boy and the girl became the unofficial hosts of these gatherings, welcoming newcomers with open arms and encouraging them to express themselves freely. At first, some were hesitant to take the stage. A shy teenager clutching a ukulele, an elderly man with a harmonica, or a young mother singing lullabies she'd written for her kids. All of them carried their own fears of judgment. But the boy and the girl made sure no one felt out of place. They would often join performers on stage, blending their sounds with others to create something unique. Their message was clear. There's no right or wrong way to make music. It's about sharing your truth, whatever form it takes. One evening, during one of these park nights, a middle-aged woman stood up to sing a song she'd composed about losing her job. Her voice trembled at first, but as she sang, her confidence grew. By the end, the crowd was cheering so loudly that she burst into tears, not of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. That moment stayed with the boy and the girl long after the night ended. It reminded them why they had started this in the first place, to give people a platform to heal, to connect, and to find strength in vulnerability. As weeks turned into months, the duo noticed subtle changes in themselves too. The boy, once driven by a need to prove himself, found joy in helping others shine. He stopped worrying about being the best, and instead focused on lifting others up, whether it was offering advice to a nervous performer or jamming alongside someone who'd never played in public before. He poured his energy into making everyone feel valued. For him, music had transformed from a competition into a shared journey. For the girl, the experience deepened her belief in the power of storytelling through music. She began writing songs not just for herself, but for the stories she heard around her. One day, while chatting with an old man at the park, she learned about his childhood growing up in a small farming community. His tales of hard work, laughter, and loss inspired her to write a ballad that became a hit at the next park night. When she performed it, the man sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face. Afterward, he hugged her tightly and said, "You gave my memories a voice." Their growing reputation as champions of community spirit caught the attention of local leaders, who approached them with an idea: expand park nights beyond the town. Limits. Why not organize a regional festival celebrating music, art, and culture? At first, the suggestion seemed overwhelming. Neither of them had ever planned anything on such a large scale. But when they saw how excited the townspeople were about the idea, they decided to give it a shot. Months of planning followed, filled with late-night meetings, endless phone calls, and countless cups of coffee. They recruited volunteers, reached out to neighboring towns, and even managed to secure funding from local businesses. The entire process was exhausting but exhilarating. Along the way, they discovered new sides of each other: the boy's knack for organizing logistics and the girl's ability to rally people with her quiet charisma. Together, they balanced each other out, turning challenges into opportunities. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. The park was transformed into a vibrant hub of activity, with stages set up for performances, booths showcasing handmade crafts, and food trucks lining the pathways. Artists from across the region came to participate, bringing with them a kaleidoscope of styles and traditions. There were folk singers, jazz bands, spoken word poets, and even a group of dancers performing traditional routines passed down through generations. The highlight of the festival was a collaborative performance featuring all the artists. The boy and the girl led the charge, inviting everyone on stage to contribute in their own way. Some played instruments, others sang, and a few simply clapped along. The result was chaotic, yet beautiful, a symphony of voices and sounds that reflected the diversity of the community. As the final notes echoed into the night, the audience erupted into applause, many standing hand in hand, moved by the unity they had witnessed. But the real magic happened afterward. Strangers introduced themselves, exchanging stories and contact information. Musicians exchanged tips and promised to collaborate in the future. Children ran around laughing, their faces painted with swirls of color. It was more than a festival. It was a celebration of humanity, a reminder that despite our differences, we are all connected by shared experiences and emotions. In the days that followed, the boy and the girl reflected on how far they'd come since that fateful guitar battle. They had started as rivals, two individuals brought together by chance, and now they were partners in creating something meaningful. Their friendship had grown stronger with each passing day, built on mutual respect and a shared vision for using music to inspire change. One evening, as they sat by the riverbank watching the sunset, the girl broke the comfortable silence between them. "Do you ever think about where we'll be in 10 years?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. He smiled, leaning back on his elbows. "Yeah, sometimes. I hope we're still doing stuff like this, helping people find their voice, you know? Maybe bigger festivals, maybe traveling to different places. But honestly, as long as we keep making music that matters, I don't care where we end up." She nodded thoughtfully, a small smile playing on her lips. "Me too. And hey, if nothing else, we've already changed things here. That's something to be proud of." They sat there for a while longer, letting the peacefulness of the moment wash over them. Neither spoke, but neither needed to. In that quiet companionship, they found reassurance that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Back in the town, life continued to flourish. Park nights remained a beloved tradition, drawing visitors from neighboring cities and fostering a sense of belonging among residents. The boy and the girl became local legends, not because of their individual talents, but because of what they represented: the power of collaboration, empathy, and the unwavering belief that everyone has a story worth telling. Years later, when people reminisced about the transformation of their town, they always mentioned the guitar battle as the catalyst. It wasn't just a contest between two musicians, it was the spark that ignited a movement. Through music, the boy and the girl had shown their community that greatness isn't measured by skill alone, but by the ability to touch hearts and bring people together. And in doing so, they had created a legacy that would endure for generations to come. As the years rolled by, the impact of their efforts only grew stronger. The boy and the girl had become fixtures in the town's cultural fabric, not because they sought fame, but because they genuinely cared about the people around them. Their partnership evolved into something deeper, less about rivalry and more about shared purpose. They weren't just musicians anymore. They were leaders, mentors, and friends to anyone who needed support. One summer, they decided to take their mission a step further. Inspired by the regional festival's success, they began organizing workshops for aspiring artists. Every Saturday morning, groups of kids, teenagers, and even adults would gather in the park to learn the basics of songwriting, playing instruments, and performing on stage. The boy focused on teaching technical skills, how to hold a guitar properly, how to build a rhythm, but he also encouraged creativity, urging his students to experiment with sounds. "There are no rules here," he'd say with a grin. "If it feels right, go for it." The girl, on the other hand, took a different approach. She believed that music was as much about emotion as it was about technique. Her sessions revolved around storytelling, how to turn personal experiences into lyrics, how to channel feelings into melodies. She often started her classes by sharing a story from her own life, then breaking down how she turned it into a song. Her lessons resonated deeply with her students, many of whom came back week after week eager to share their progress. Among those students was a young boy who barely spoke when he first joined the workshop. He was shy, almost painfully so, and seemed unsure if he belonged there. But over time he began opening up, revealing a hidden talent for writing poetry. With encouragement from the girl, he started setting his words to music, using an old keyboard, donated by one of the volunteers. By the end of the summer, he performed his very first original song at Park Night, a hauntingly beautiful piece about growing up in a broken home. The audience erupted into applause, and the boy stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. It was a moment neither he nor anyone else present would ever forget. Stories like this became commonplace. People who once doubted their abilities found courage through the workshops. Some went on to pursue careers in music, while others simply discovered a new way to express themselves. For the boy and the girl, these transformations were the ultimate reward. Watching someone find their voice was far more fulfilling than any accolade or recognition could ever be. But their work didn't stop at music. Over time, they expanded their focus to include other forms of art, painting, dance, theater, and even spoken word poetry. They collaborated with local schools, libraries, and community centers, creating programs that gave people access to tools and resources they might not otherwise have had. One particularly memorable project involved turning an abandoned warehouse into a vibrant arts hub. Volunteers painted murals on the walls, installed soundproof rooms for rehearsals, and set up a small stage for performances. Within months, the space became a haven for creative minds of all ages. Their efforts didn't go unnoticed. News outlets from neighboring cities began covering their initiatives, praising them for revitalizing a town that had once been overlooked. Invitations poured in from across the country, asking them to speak at conferences, lead master classes, and consult on similar projects. At first, they hesitated, unsure if they were ready to leave their hometown behind. But eventually they realized that spreading their message beyond their borders could amplify its impact. Their first trip outside the state was eye-opening. They visited a city grappling with economic hardship, where opportunities for young people were scarce. Working alongside local organizers, they helped establish a program similar to Park Nights, giving residents a chance to showcase their talents and rebuild a sense of pride in their community. Seeing the joy on people's faces reminded them why they had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about being heroes. It was about planting seeds of hope and watching them grow. Each new place they visited taught them something valuable. In one town, they met a group of elderly musicians who played traditional folk songs passed down through generations. The boy and the girl spent hours learning from them, realizing how important it was to preserve cultural heritage through music. In another, they encountered a teenager whose rapping skills blew them away. They mentored him, helping him refine his craft and connect with industry professionals. Years later, he credited them with launching his career. Despite their growing influence, they remained grounded. No matter where they traveled, they always returned home, knowing that their roots were what kept them strong. Back in their own town, they continued hosting Park Nights, mentoring students, and dreaming up new ways to inspire others. Their friendship deepened with every challenge they faced together, forged through late-night brainstorming sessions, disagreements resolved with laughter, and countless moments of mutual admiration. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the girl's house sipping tea, she posed a question that lingered in the air long after it was asked. "Do you think we'll ever stop doing this? I mean, will there come a point where we've done enough?" He thought about it for a moment, swirling his cup absent-mindedly. "I don't know," he admitted. "But honestly, I don't think we'll ever feel like we've done enough. There's always more to do, more people to reach. Besides," he added with a smile, "why would we want to stop? This is what makes us happy." She nodded, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "You're right. As long as we're making a difference, even just a little bit, we should keep going." By now, their story had spread far beyond their town, People wrote articles about them, calling them pioneers of grassroots activism through art. Schools included their journey in lesson plans, teaching students about the power of collaboration and empathy. Yet despite the attention, they never let it change who they were. They stayed humble, always reminding themselves that their work was never about them. It was about the lives they touched along the way and touched lives they did. Countless individuals credited them with changing their perspectives, inspiring them to pursue their passions, or simply giving them a reason to believe in themselves. A woman who attended one of their workshops later became a counselor using art therapy to help trauma survivors heal. A man who learned to play the drums at park nights went on to start a band that raised money for charity. Even the boy who wrote the heartbreaking song about his family struggles grew up to become a teacher, passing on the lessons he'd learned to his own students. Through it all, the boy and the girl remained side by side, two halves of a whole that complemented each other perfectly. They may have started as rivals, brought together by a simple guitar battle, but they ended up as partners in creating something extraordinary. Together, they proved that true greatness isn't about standing out. It's about lifting others up, about finding beauty in connection, and about believing in the transformative power of art. Years later, when they looked back on their journey, they didn't see a series of accomplishments or milestones. Instead, they saw faces, the smiling children at their workshops, the grateful parents, the strangers turned friends who joined them on stage. They saw the ripple effect of their actions, spreading outward like waves in a pond. And they knew, without a doubt, that their legacy wasn't written in headlines or awards. It was etched into the hearts of everyone they had inspired to dream bigger, love harder, and live fuller. For the boy and the girl, that was enough. As the years passed, the boy and the girl grew older, their hair streaked with gray and their hands marked by years of strumming strings and writing lyrics. But their passion for music and their commitment to helping others never waned. If anything, it deepened. They had become living legends in their town, not just because of what they had accomplished, but because of the values they represented: kindness, resilience, and the belief that everyone has a voice worth hearing. 1. Crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, the boy suggested something new. "What if we write a song together?" he said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "Not just any song, one that tells our story, something we can leave behind for the next generation." The girl smiled, intrigued by the idea. "You mean like a legacy song?" "Exactly," he replied. "A piece that captures everything we've been through, the battles, the friendships, the festivals, the workshops, something that says who we are and what we stand for." They spent weeks working on it, pouring their hearts into every note and lyric. The melody was a blend of their styles, his bold, driving rhythms paired with her soft, soulful chords. The lyrics told their journey, from the day they first faced off under the oak tree to the countless lives they had touched along the way. It wasn't just about them, it was about everyone who had joined them on this musical adventure. When the song was finally ready, they debuted it at park night. The crowd gathered around, sensing that this performance would be special. As the first notes rang out, a hush fell over the park. The boy's voice carried the opening line, strong and steady, while the girl harmonized softly in the background. Together they painted a picture of struggle and triumph, of rivalry turning into friendship, of individual dreams merging into a shared vision. By the time they reached the final chorus, the entire audience was singing along, their voices rising in unison. It was a moment of pure connection, one that transcended age, background, and experience. When the last note faded into the night, there was silence, not awkward or uncomfortable, but filled with reverence. Then, slowly, the applause began, building into a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very trees. That song became more than just a tune. It became a symbol of hope and unity. People recorded it, shared it, and played it at gatherings across the region. Teachers used it in classrooms to spark discussions about teamwork and perseverance. Families sang it during holidays, passing it down to their children like a cherished heirloom. It was proof that art could endure, carrying messages far beyond its creators' lifetimes. But even as their influence spread, the boy and the girl never lost sight of what mattered most, the everyday moments that made life beautiful. They still spent hours mentoring young musicians, sitting cross-legged on the grass as they offered advice or encouragement. They still attended park nights, cheering loudly for newcomers brave enough to take the stage. And they still found joy in simply playing together, their guitars weaving melodies that spoke louder than words ever could. One evening, as they sat by the riverbank watching the sunset, the girl turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what people will say about us when we're gone?" He chuckled, leaning back on his elbows. Probably something cheesy like, "They changed the world." He paused, then added, "But honestly, I don't care what they say. What matters is how we made people feel, how we helped them see their own potential." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah, that's all that really matters." Their later years were marked by quiet contentment. Though they slowed down physically, their spirits remained as vibrant as ever. They continued hosting events, though on a smaller scale, often inviting friends and former students to join them. These intimate gatherings felt less like performances and more like family reunions, filled with laughter, stories, and plenty of music. Eventually, the inevitable happened. First, the boy passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy of passion and purpose. His absence left a void in the community, but also a renewed determination to carry forward the work he had started. A few years later, the girl followed, her final days spent surrounded by loved ones and the melodies of her favorite songs. In their honor, the town renamed Park Night Harmony Festival, dedicating it to their memory. Every year, musicians from near and far came to celebrate their impact, performing the duo's famous legacy song as a tribute. The festival became a pilgrimage of sorts, drawing people eager to witness the magic that had once transformed a sleepy little town into a beacon of creativity and compassion. Decades after their passing, their story continued to inspire. Schoolchildren learned about them in history classes, marveling at how two individuals could ignite such profound change. Artists cited them as role models, crediting their philosophy of collaboration and authenticity with shaping modern approaches to community art. Even those who had never met them felt connected to their mission, finding strength in the idea that even the smallest actions could create ripples of positivity. And so, the boy and the girl lived on, not just in memories, but in the countless lives they had touched. Their legacy was written not in stone, but in the hearts of everyone who dared to pick up an instrument, write a poem, or share a piece of themselves with the world. They had proven that true greatness isn't measured by accolades or achievements. It's measured by the love and inspiration you leave behind. Years later, when a young musician stood beneath the same oak tree where it all began, guitar in hand and dreams in their heart, they might not have known the full story of the boy and the girl. But as they played their first chord, feeling the music flow through them, they carried forward the lesson those two had taught the world. That art has the power to heal, unite, and transform, and that everyone, no matter how quiet or unassuming, has a song worth sharing.